Hello, my name is Duncan and welcome to Back Away from the Donkey or Baths Books. Any weird noises you hear behind me? It's probably going to be Micah the Labrador, or even, hello, or even Gizmo the Yorkie. So yes, this is one of my Bookmas video, day 11 I think we're on. But what I was doing today is I'm going to do my favourite reads of the year. I think I've got 10 or 12 of them, I can't remember which. But these are, if you want to see what I've read this year, you can always have a look at my Goodreads. I've read about 60 oddish books. And if I'm still on BookTube next year, which hopefully I will be, I will do them from after this date, so that any I read towards the end of the year would also get counted. But these are just like my favourite reads. They may not be the best books, they may be the best books, and they're in no particular order. And these are just books that I've enjoyed and had fun with. I've got a bit of a list in front of me and a pile of books. I am going to start with the ones that were on Kindle because it's just easier for me to do that. As you may know, Kindle ebooks is my favourite format, and I've only done that on a few books. But yeah, I think I've got 3 there. So the first book I will do is Jamie Mollett's Kings of the Dead World. Just gonna show you the cover there on my Lenovo. It's just the easiest way to do it. I was intrigued by this book because I'd heard about it, and it's taken the same idea that's in Philip Jose Farmer's Daywell books, which is people's overpopulation and people are put to sleep through certain times. Philip Jose Farmer's is set thousands and thousands of years in the future, so it's become a normal. This is set just after, and people are put to sleep for like 3 months at a time while the rest of the population wakes up, and to stop overpopulation and war and stuff. And it's very grim, dark, dystopian the way Jamie Mollett does it in this. It is one of the books, it goes to my thing about why I do not DNF books, because I didn't like this book till about probably the last 10% of it, and it all felt like it was coming together. It's told from 2 or 3 perspectives of somebody overlooking all the people sleeping, somebody who monitors them, and from people who are sleeping and when they wake up. And then you've got flashbacks going to before this law was brought in. It's very grim, very dark. It's prose-wise, it's very literary, which in some ways is good, in some ways is bad, because it can get trip over its own cleverness. But it's well worth a read. So yeah, Kings of the Dead World surprised me, and it's been one of my favourite reads of the year, and I might even reread it next year just to sort of give it another go. Here's my pom-pom. So yeah, so that was one of my first choices, and another one I went for was, sorry, just picking up my Kindle here, is Alan E. Norse's The Blade Runner. I did a little video on this, if you look back on it, and Alan E. Norse, The Blade Runner is nothing to do with the film Blade Runner. It is basically what Ridley Scott took the title from to use on the film of Philip K. Dick's novel To Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. This is about, set in the far future of 2007, I think, and it is about medical, people can only get medical help if they have agreed to be sterilised, so not to give birth, because there's another overpopulation sort of theme. And so there's a big underground of medical procedures going on underground, and then there's an outbreak of a disease, so it's very sort of current, and all these underground doctors and that end up helping. A Blade Runner is somebody who gets the underground doctors their equipment and their devices, everything from scalpels to medicines that they can use for thing. It's well written. It's not, a few of the characters are a little cardboard cutout, but as a concept and that, it's a really interesting read, and I really enjoyed it. And it's nothing to do with the original Blade Runner, and a lot of the themes are in it current about, you know, especially in America, it would be quite current about the limitations of medicine unless you've got the money and the authority to deal with it. And obviously with the pandemic, with the outbreak of the disease, it made it even more current. So yeah, I really enjoyed that, The Blade Runner, Alan Norse. That, I've read a few of his short stories before, but that is the first novel of his read, so I'm going to probably look out for him, because as a writer, he was a medical doctor and then he gave it up to continue science fiction writing. So a lot of his books focus on medicine, and so that is very well written. There's another book of his called The Staff Surgeon, which I'm quite interested in getting hold of at some point. So yeah, there's those two on the Kindle. Another one I haven't got a picture of the cover, and I will pop one up here in a second, is Vernor Vinge's True Names, which I've raved about all year. It's a novella, technically, but I count it. And it was written in 81, around about then. Before it came out, before William Gibson's Burning Chrome collection. And it's basically the precursor of cyberpunk. It's not really a cyberpunk book, but you have people on the internet, or the internet as it was then, who meet in almost with avatars in rooms as wizards, and literally in a sort of virtual castle and that, to hack. And they're hackers. In some ways it relates to the film Hackers from 1998. Very similar ideas. But the whole point of it is that if you give out your true name, it means people can find you in the real world, and that's not good. And it involves this one guy that government gets hold of his true name, but he decides to help them to take down this other hacker that's basically trying to take over the whole of the system. And it is well written scientifically, because Vernor Vinge's got all the scientific credentials well written. And if you, some people may think it's lackluster now after a lot of the computer stuff they read, but if you consider when it was written, and the most powerful personal computer was a ZX81, it is pretty fantastic. So yeah, Vernor Vinge's True Names, one of my favourite reads of the year. Next we get on to some non-science fiction. 6 Days of the Condor. It was done as a film, 3 Days of the Condor. I watched the film this year. It's the first time I've watched it, Robert Redford. And I saw the book around and thought, I'd like to read that. It's quite a short book. It's, yeah, 150 pages. But it's a really good little read. It's trundles along. It's basically about a character, I can't remember his name, tells me on the back probably. Malcolm Conan Condor. He works for the CIA, but he's in a he's an analyst, so no actions, nothing like that. He just analyses books and articles in newspapers and stuff like that. And one day he goes off for lunch and comes back, and the whole of the people in the building he works in are dead. They've all been assassinated. And he contacts back, and it's about him trying to basically stay alive and work out what has gone on. For somebody who wasn't an analyst, it's well written. At the time, it was a really, really big book in the mid-70s. And I've sort of got into a few sort of 60s and 70s politically type thrillers over the past year. Micah, can you stop licking my hand? Sorry, I've opened my door, constantly licking my hand here. It's really annoying, isn't it? Just settle down, girly. But yes, so yeah, 3 Days of Condor. Because I also read 8 Days in May? So Many Days in May, which was 1960s one, which was another politically type thriller, and I really enjoyed that. Next on my list of books I really had fun with this year was Charles Sheffield, The Web Between Worlds. I'd never actually read any Charles Sheffield. He was a physicist, and this is about the building of a space elevator, or a skyhook, whatever you want to call it, and the theories behind it. And it's basically, if you don't know, it is a huge cable that goes from here into space. There's normally an asteroid or something at the other end to counterweight it, to put a vehicle going all the way up. It's a theory, a really strong scientific theory about getting cheap payloads up into space. And this is basically a techno thriller based around that. It came out around the same time as The Fountains of Paradise, Arthur C. Clarke. And he actually wrote to Arthur C. Clarke, and Arthur C. Clarke put a letter in one edition of this book, basically saying, it's had nothing to do with me. It's just two people coming up with the same idea at the same time. I read The Fountains of Paradise just after this because I was intrigued to read it, because I'd never read it, and I think this is a better book. It's a, as I said, it's a techno thriller, characterizations, great. Arthur C. Clarke I always struggle with. Arthur C. Clarke is one of those authors I think I really should like him. But every time I read one of his books, a lot of them leave me cold. I do try. I read The Sands of Mars. I think it's called The Sands of Mars. No, Sands of the Moon. One based on the moon. It's basically the Poseidon adventure on the moon, which was okay. But yeah, I really sometimes struggle with obviously, like, I think it's a lot of it to do with, I don't think his characters are very good. But anyway, Charles Sheffield, The Web Between Worlds. Read it if you've not read it. My first Charles Sheffield. I've got Summertide on the shelf back there that I picked up this year as well, which is going to be the next one I'll read, because I want to explore a lot of Charles Sheffield's work. Okay, and my next one will be the Orkney Inga saga. As it's about the place I live, I thought I'd better get around to reading it. It is basically from the Viking sagas about the Orkney Islands and around the north of Scotland. And as that's where I live, I thought I'd better get around to reading it. And I really had fun reading this. Once you get into the flow of it, it's Penguin translation. It's quite interesting, but it's talking about places I know, which is quite interesting. It's also got one of the few descriptions of a blood eagle, which was so-called this Viking thing of literally you slit somebody's back open, pull their lungs out, and put their lungs across their shoulders while they're still alive. There's only two mentions. I think there's only two mentions of it in Viking text. It's in here, and there's another one, and it's sort of gone into myth as these things they put in films and what have you. Whether they really did it or not, nobody knows, but it's described in here, and it's pretty gruesome. If you read this, it's all your sort of things about the Vikings are true. They are it is really brutal in places, but then they come back and then they're farmers. But I love historical stuff, text like this, and the Orkney saga. I want to get through all the other Icelandic sagas. I've got the Vinland saga back there, and there's probably a few others that I'm going to get through over the next year or so. So yes, so that was the Orkney saga. I said we have got up the road, we've got in Orfa, which is just up the road from here, they've got a replica Viking ship, and they've got all about the Orkney saga on the walls in this visitor centre, which is quite fantastic to go and look at, which I've seen. So yes, that's why it sort of rang to me, and I thought I better get around to actually reading it, and I was lucky enough to get hold of that copy this year. My next one was, I said, quite a lot of these one I'm picking up, it's like my first, even though I've been like reading for, like I'm 50 odd years old, and I've been reading since sort of the mid-70s, science fiction, fantasy and other things. A lot of this year I've managed to get hold of some authors I'd never read, which is great. So my next one is David Gemmell, Echoes of the Great Song. I love the title of the book. David Gemmell, I can remember seeing his books around in the late 80s, early 90s in bookshops, and I never picked any up. So this was actually my first experience of it. And this is about, it's basically, really, it's almost science fiction with a sort of fantasy bent on it. It's about this immortal, well, almost immortal race called the Avatars, who are on this planet, and everybody else on the planet is like normal human type people who are mortal, and they get their power from these crystals, which contain energy, but that has been fading all over the centuries. But what happens is two moons appear in the sky, and this race from the Crystal Queen from this other planets come and invade this planet, and it's basically about them battling each other. But what's interesting is all the characters in this, you start off in this book and none of the characters are likable. You don't like anybody, but towards the end of the book you don't get to like them, but you end up rooting for them. And the mythology around it and the world building is incredible. The way he writes battle scenes is fantastic. So I really need to get my hands on some more Gemmell and read some more Gemmell this year. But yes, Echoes of the Great Song, it's just a one-off book. And so it's nice to have fantasy ones on 26 books. And I really enjoyed that for my first experience of Gemmell. This next one's a bit of a weird one. Not a weird one, but weird one to describe. This is Jonathan Carroll, Voice of Our Shadow. And so it was part of the Fantasy Masterworks one I got. I'm going to read the back of this because the back of it describes it better than I ever could. Because the whole book has this really creepy, foreboding atmosphere to it. It's got, Joe Lennox feels a secret guilt for the death of his more charismatic brother but he feels some respite from the awful memory in Vienna. Then he meets Paul and India Tate. India is a fine artist and Paul is a brilliant magician with extraordinary powers. The two of them become an essential part of Joe's life, and he finds himself gradually in love with India inevitably. Paul finds out there's tragic consequences. Now Joe has another death on his conscience, and there's another voice calling to him from beyond the grave, and this one can conjure up nightmares. Yeah, so it's really like a slow build of this guy meeting this couple and coming into their friendship. And then he's also got the haunting of his brother's death behind him, and his brother bullied him mercilessly, and you don't even know why he feels guilty about it, because it's all quite strange. He feels guilty for being almost a survivor. And it's a really, really hard book to describe. I spoke to somebody who's read quite a bit of Carroll's work, and they said they didn't reckon this was one of his best books, but I really enjoyed it. But they reckon the way it's done is quite sort of typical of the way he writes. So I will read some more, but I really liked this. It was totally different, totally sort of off the wall. So yeah, Jonathan Carroll. I think I've got 12 books here. So next one was my first read for the year, was Andy Weir, Artemis. I love this. It was a really easy read. Andy Weir's writing style is really easy to read. If you read The Martian and Project Hail Mary, this was the book in the middle that everybody forgets about. I don't think this book gets enough credit. I think when it came out of The Martian, people were expecting it to be The Martian, and it's not. But it's about this young girl who lives on the moon. Not young girl, she's perhaps 18, 19 years old. And it's about her working with criminals, and I think the best description was, yeah, she's got a chance to make a load of money by blowing up some oxygen-producing thing to work with some criminals, and it all goes wrong. And it's just almost... it's quite hard to describe, but yeah, it is fun. I know it's an option for a film, whether it's going to be make a film or not, because I know people rate Project Hail Mary a lot more, but I really like this book, and I think more people should read it. And I said, as with all Andy Weirs, I will read what the back says because I'm describing it really badly. Welcome to Artemis, the first city on the moon. Population 2,000, mostly tourists, some criminals. Jasper Shara is one of the criminals. She lives in the poor area of Artemis and subsidizes her work as a porter and smuggling contraband onto the moon. But it's not enough. But she's offered the chance to make a lot of money, and she jumps at it. Now all she needs to do is plan the perfect crime in one of the most dangerous places in the universe and survive it. Said, I really liked it. So if you've read Andy Weir, The Martian, which is a great book, I suggest you read this and try and go without any preconceptions, because I don't know why it doesn't get more love. Next one of my favourite reads from the year is, you may have heard that, my emails went off in the background, is Dimension of Miracles, Robert Sheckley. Did a video on this a couple of weeks back, so if you want to go and check that out, that's good. And it's basically about this guy. He wins an intergalactic lottery and gets taken to the centre of the galaxy and has to find his way back. That's a simple thing. It's satire, it's got sentient cities, planets that are built to order, and this was 10 years before the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And it's a great book, lots of fun. Look it out if you're out there. And my final book of my 10, 12, I think it's 12 of my favourite reads of the year, is Jack Williamson, Darker Than You Think. It's a werewolf novel, and it's a great werewolf novel. It's not like the modern ones, which is all alpha males with love things and what have you. This is just a great and different werewolf book. If you like werewolf stuff and horror stuff, but you're not the sort of YA, as much as I hate the term YA type stuff, but proper werewolf novel, read Jack Williamson. It is a fantastic book. So yes, Darker Than You Think. So that is my 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's 11 or 12. I'll work it out in the end and I'll put it in the title how many books I've chosen. But yes, that's my 12 favourite reads from all I've read this year. If you want to see what I've been reading, you can always have a look at my Goodreads. I'll set the links down below. Probably back of this week or early next week, I'm going to do my favourite reads which were rereads of this week, because probably around about at least 50% of what I read is probably rereading, and I'm a big fan of rereading books because you discover so much new stuff within those texts. So I'll be doing a video on that soon, and I will see you all then. So for those of you out there, happy Sunday. I hope it's warmer where you are. It's about -2 centigrade here. It was -4-ish overnight, but at least we're better off than the Highlands, where it was about -8 or -10, I think. So yes, I will see you all soon, and thank you all for watching.